entire item and you measure the area over a surface. You've got to do a pretty big surface to do a wind farm. I did ask her to have a crane, but Lane said no, we're not spending that money because apparently it's like $30,000 a day. And there's all sort of dangerous stuff. I could send some gear up without me, but the way that they measure it, they actually don't measure up in the air. They measure down in the ground. Next. So, if we imagine on the line source, we have now a surface area and we have all those lines, then the whole thing can be radiating out as a surface. So, if you imagine that it's coming out in a surface, it's got a totally different shape. If you put your hands together to create like a telescope and look through it, you get to do this now. When you look through your hands, you won't see what's down there because you've shielded. So what happens is we get a shielding effect where the energy is not dropping down. So, prove that it's not splaying out like a hemisphere. Professor Dickinson had this in his paper, cavitation of a turbine. It's not a wind turbine, it's a propeller. But what it shows is we've got a spiral wave. The spiral wave is not expanding. This one is, I guess that's a wind farm, isn't it? And it's not expanding. So what we have is that we've got a wave that's curling around, that's going out and focused around the energy. So this can't be a point source. It's radiating out in terms of a low frequency, which is sort of like a line source. Now, the conventional techniques of measuring in the near field for acoustics just doesn't work because of the size of these things. So you have a problem in determining the sound power level, and they're not really giving away cranes to do the work. Then what you've got to worry about is that if we take this wave that's going around, it's not there all the time. And the report actually says that if you stand at a turbine and look at it, about 2 o'clock on the downward sweep, which was that hot spot, that's one hot spot. There's another one going up on the upward sweep about 8 o'clock, and they sound different. So the noise is not the same all the way over. So what you have is you've now got a phasing problem. You've got the sound that comes in and out for one turbine, and that makes it difficult to measure. And if you measure it on the ground at 150 metres from the base of the turbine, well, that's down in the shadow zone. And then if you've got a wind farm with turbines that aren't running at the same speed, they're not in sync, they're at different distances, then the whole thing of phasing comes in and out. It is complex, and DBA doesn't work. Next.
Steve, time's getting on a little bit. Could I do want to have some questions from the floor. Could I suggest perhaps you pick out the most important answers, the questions and answers you think are the ones that are coming? Perhaps another 10 minutes on this.
Next one, audibility. It wasn't audible. Let me just run through this. The next one, 2/24, is important. You guys can go and read it about what actually the Australian said. I think I need this for my defence. Next one. You can go and read it. There's some pretty nasty comments, and there's some people that were various things attributed to me, which is wrong. Next one. And a bit about the facts that I was quoting, cause and effect, wasn't by me. Move over, keep going. There was one there for the Portland Observer, but you guys know you weren't doing it. Multi-channel acquisition system, the claims about the number of days is wrong. I've already said how long it was there. We've already said it's not a scientific study, infrasound, presence. Okay, let's go down to, I think this is in part, go down to what I call 30. Yeah, this one's Canada Health. There's some questions about Canada Health, and there's some very interesting things that they're wrong. And I think this is important. If we go to the slides that follow that, I've talked about these studies. Next. If you get the study, well, these reports are now up on Windwatch, but it's not an authoritative source. So if you go to Canada Health, they get this. By the way, they say it's a challenge. I like this, a non-trivial challenge, doing infrasound. And it's different slope, go down. They get all these graphs. Amazingly, they look very similar to what I found. Next. On, off, same thing. Next. This is interesting, and this is important. They talk about mathematical models that don't work. They get distances far out. Go next. That's the graph. They say that's the background and that's the source, which, by the way, the primer doesn't say that. It mixes up the words. It's a microbarometer, 2.5 kilometres next. This is pretty important. This actually talks about you can get out to 10 kilometres for this infrasound. They've got one spot, it's there 45% of the time. It says it can be measured fairly often at distances. Special equipment, you need to know what's going on. Next. This is what Adelaide University did at Waterloo. Pictures by now you guys should be knowing, it looks very similar. On-off, turbine signatures, go. This is in Canada Health, you get this off the website. They actually say some different things to the question, but next. They talk about annoyance, they don't know what's going on. Next. This is the infrasound. This is what the study said, that's what Canada Health preliminary results say. They don't agree with one another. Somebody's mixed it up a little bit. Pretty important. I can't tell you about the noise from Canada Health because they won't release that noise data. But yes, they did know about sensation, they haven't looked into frequencies. But here's the infrasound, and this is what Canada Health preliminary result have said. You can measure it, they trace it, record it, but this one says what you can do. Next. Look, I'm not a professor. And I've already done that. Next. Okay, this is new, and I must probably stop at this one. This is data that actually covers the on-off, and this is the regression line approach. This is all the measurement turbines, and I've given the L90 level, and there's a regression line. We're measuring wind and turbines. This is just taking the data only on the wind turbines, but we don't know which way the wind was blowing. So how good is an average if you're determining? Because this is the New Zealand standard. It's based upon sleep disturbance for people in Europe from traffic, not from wind turbines. They do this thing and they come up with it. And they give 15 dB for an outside-inside. We use 10. There's no studies talking about it. And they don't look at it. If you've got low frequency, you need to adjust it. There's a whole pile of problems in this. Next one. This is again on. This is actually the turbine off. This is the important thing from this study. This is the turbines in a complete shutdown and the wind is blowing. This is the data that says what's going on. This should be similar to the pre-construction results. Here's a test that's been able to do it. We've got this data. So theoretically, you take this away from that in logarithmic terms and you get the wind farm contribution as an L95. Next. That's what I've done. Wind turbines on, wind turbines off, and the contribution calculated. Why did it cross over? Well, it was actually noisy this time of year when we did this test. We get the differences. I don't think... I only got up to my 33 and I had 52. Look, if somebody has one of the questions later that's important, by all means ask and I'll see what I can do.
Okay. A remarkable effort, Stephen. Happy you'll appreciate we haven't tried to wind up those questions to give the count, but it's just to make sure that people do have the opportunity from the floor. And as Stephen said, I suggest if you've got one of the questions that's there that hasn't been answered that you're really keen to get, then perhaps you find a way to ask it, albeit briefly. So, if people do have questions from the floor, we'll get you to come up over here to the microphone and just queue up. We'll use the, and I should say, if there aren't any questions from the floor, then we'll go back to the ones we had before. So, we will ask people a couple of things. First of all, please give your name and your relevant status in relation to the wind farm or to the study, if you can do it. I would also ask, this is an opportunity for questions, not for statements. So please keep your questions relatively short, perhaps to two parts. And if you go on for more than a minute, then I'll probably ask you to wind up and get to the point. Okay. First question.
I'm actually the next question on the list. So you can read it out anyway. John McMahon from Wind Industry Reform Victoria. The significant effects of turbines of this size are very concerning and no doubt very problematic for the residents of Cape Bridgewater and those living near other wind projects. New regulations allow turbines to be built to any size. How do you think these effects will change when turbines are, for example, 4 or 5 megawatts and 200 metres high or even higher?
Well, Professor Moller is the one that's done a lot of this work a while ago. As the turbines get bigger and larger capacities, because the blades are bigger, so that you don't have the tips going at super colossal speeds, you actually have to slow it down. As you slow them down, then you move the frequencies down and the infrasound becomes in sort of relatively in a lower level, and because it's a larger surface area, they become greater. The noise also changes in the lower frequency coming down, but they've got through the data in that area that it gets worse. DBA, it's a little bit, but the DBA is biased towards the high frequency.
Okay, any other questions?
My name's Michael Byrne. I'm a resident of Cape Bridgewater. I live in the township. First of all, I'd like to thank Pacific Hydro for the funding, and I'd like to thank Senator Madigan for his involvement. It's very important, and there has to be more of it. My question is about distance in relation to the 3 houses from the turbines, and also in that statement of distance, I'm talking about the 1 kilometre ruling, the 2 kilometre ruling, and that is on the political agenda at this point in time. And I'll ask you, Stephen, have your lifetime studies provided a personal opinion on this issue?
If I relate to this study, I had 650, 1,000 and 1,600 metres. If I take DBWTS, then the separation distance for, say, sensation 2 is significantly greater. In terms of Waubra, I did some measurements at a house for people that were seriously affected, and it had been going on for a while. I told them to go and rent a house, and they did it 5 kilometres away. Didn't have a problem, so they bought a block of land and built a new house at 5.1 kilometres away, and they're all okay. So there is an issue in terms of the separation distance. The problem is that if you do it in DBA, a turbine's not as quiet as a fridge, but the point is that the DBA is not addressing these issues. So at the moment, the regulations are in DBA, and people are disturbed, so we need to look at it.
G'day, Alan Schaefer and Anne Schaefer. Our background is that we were living next to a turbine facility at Berrybank. We were going to have 16 turbines around our property, almost in a complete circle. Within 2 kilometres, closest was 700. Naturally, we were concerned. Firstly, I'd like to take my hat off to Pacific Hydro for providing the funds for this study. And secondly, to you, Steve, you've done a phenomenal job, a lot of which I don't understand, unfortunately, but I think I get the gist. This condition 5, or sensation 5, is fairly serious. People are walking away from their houses. That's what I would have had to do, probably. I've been told by esteemed acousticians. We would have had to do, sorry. I'm getting to the guts of the problem, and we haven't sort of touched on it tonight, and I may be out of order, but please correct me if I am. This condition 5 forces people out of their houses.
They were wanting to leave.
Well,
some did for the day.
Yeah, and I personally know some of these people here, and they've been doing that for 6 years. Back in 2002, there was a proposed health farm for this facility, going alongside this facility. excuse me while I put my glasses on, I'll read a bit of this out to you.
And get
I'm trying to keep it as brief as I can. Pacific Hydro Environmental Planning Manager Roger Holloway made objections on behalf of the company because this company wanted to build a health farm next to the Cape Bridgewater wind farm. Approval of the health farm would reduce flexibility, etc., etc. Potential noise, nuisance during construction and normal operations of the wind farm over a period of at least 25 years. The submission by Pacific Hydro also raised concerns that conditions of the permit were insufficient to protect the clients and occupants of the health farm from the potential noise and nuisance arising from the wind farm. The conditions were insufficient to protect the wind farm owners, developers and operators from legal or statutory actions by clients, occupants, owners and operators of the proposed health farm. I can accept all that and I understand what Pacific Hydro were saying. What I can't accept is these three houses that you did the study on vary from 650 to 1.3 kilometres from the wind farm facility. Do you see the correlation? Pacific Hydro had just gone ahead. They've refused to have the wind farm there because of those reasons, and yet these three properties are still standing there.